y'all. Welcome back to day 2 of our conversations on the priesthood. Hopefully today will be a short video. I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, but we'll have our final test really on this Thursday. We'll have one more test, but it'll be more of a subjective review. What did you kind of get out of this class test? And that should hopefully bring up some of your guys' grades because we won't have an exam, right? So again, if you'll have the test on Thursday, and then one final test when literally it's your senior week, but since you guys don't have exams, it'll kind of be your exam week. But today we're going to look at, again, some of the misconceptions or preconceptions about the priesthood, and then we'll give some counterexamples to combat some of those misconceptions. And the one I want to focus on today is kind of the role of the priest. Like, why do we need priests? So whether you belong to a Protestant church or maybe a non-denominational church or maybe even no church at all, and maybe even especially if you belong to the Catholic Church, you might be confused of why do we even need priests, right? When I was teaching in Tampa, I had a student who all the time was telling me, like, I connect better to God by myself. I don't need to go to Mass. I don't need a priest to help me forgive my sins. I just talk to Jesus and things are fine. And that's a good practice. Like, I'm not knocking doing that, and that's a good thing. But I do think sometimes we just forget about why priests are important, especially if you live in New Orleans and priests have just been a part of your life forever. It kind of anything that's common, you kind of forget its significance. It's actually one of the great things that's come out of the coronavirus things is like, you might have taken for granted just being able to go to your friend's house and hang out, or doing nothing together with your family outside of the house. I know I was excited today just to even go fill up my car with gas. I was like, all right, I'm getting out of the house, finally. It's easy when things are commonplace to take them for granted, and I think the priesthood can sometimes fit into that role. So I've heard some of these, like, why do we need a priest to, whether it's say Mass, forgive sins, something like that. Priests are, antiquated, they're old school. So you got Pope Benedict here, in the chasuble with this, gold chalice saying Mass in the Vatican. Bill Maher, we looked at one of his videos early in the year. He's a devout atheist. He has his own show on HBO, and he's like, "Look, the Pope's not holier than me because he wears a dress and a funny hat. It's like I could do that, I just don't, right? Like, he's just a normal guy." Again, I think Bill Maher's wrong in this regard, but we'll talk about why. And if you've ever seen the movie Office Space, it's a hilarious movie. I think it is rated R, so you might need to get your parents' permission for that. But at least the first half of Office Space is really funny. These two guys are brought in. It's about like working in an office like in the mid '90s and just how awful the cubicle tech environment is. But these guys are brought in to clear house, and so like any guy whose job is really obsolete or they're dead weight, they're trying to figure that out and fire those people. And so one of the great lines is, "What would you say you do here?" And I'll put that link below this video. But I think that question can be asked a lot of times to priests, like, what is it you say you do here? Especially if we don't have a sacramental vision of the world where the sacraments are important. What is it that a priest really does? So today we hopefully will answer that question. Okay, so the first part of that is just that the priest represents Christ. And it's really easy, break it down. Represents. It's sometimes, again, commonplace things, we forget what they mean. Represents doesn't just mean like he's kind of a nice symbol for Christ. Like, he's supposed to be in persona Christi, in the person of Christ, making Christ present, representing Christ to God's people. Now, the priest is not Christ, right? He's not perfect. The holiness of the priest really has very little to do with the efficacy of the sacraments, right? So let's say the priest himself needs to go to confession, but he's hearing your confession. That doesn't make your sacrament of confession any less valid. Same thing goes for the Eucharist and things like that. It's not dependent upon the holiness of the person of the priest, but rather when the priest, an ordained priest, intends to do the work of the church, then the grace, through the grace of God, the sacrament is valid and it works. But like, here's a picture of Father Dyer, right, hearing confessions, the drive-through confessions during the coronavirus and during Lent. And what you see in this, right, is someone that is going out and being Christ to his people. Currently, what Father Dyer is doing is that he is living in self-quarantine downtown and going to administer the sacraments to doctors and nurses and different patients dealing with the coronavirus in University Medical Center. He's putting himself with the marginalized, right, with the sick, doing the very same things that Christ did in the Gospels today. And there's something about the fact that he is an ordained priest that there's a deeper reality there that, or you could say a connection to God there that is not the same for someone who's not a priest, right? That he is in many ways meant to bring Christ or represent Christ to these people. And so that's that is the primary function of the priest, right? But I think we get that, I say, like, we could lose sight of that in the fact of how common it is, at least in New Orleans, or you could say we lose sight of that fact when we don't have that sacramental vision, when we just think that, oh, he's just a guy wearing a black t-shirt with a white collar. Okay, true, he is just a guy who's wearing a specific uniform, but that's not what makes him a priest, right? And so maybe that'll become a little bit more clear in the next slide. These pictures are from one of my favorite movies about priests. It's called Calvary, and the main plot is the fact that this guy, this priest, played by Brendan Gleeson, hears a confession, and this is in modern day Ireland. He's in a small town in Ireland, and this is during like the church's latest sex abuse crisis, and so priests, are distrusted. A lot of them are seen as being abusers or and things like that. And the movie opens with this confession, where this guy is confessing that he was sexually abused by a priest when he was a kid, and that's not necessarily something that is his fault, right? It's not a sin on his part. But what he went into the confessional so that he would remain anonymous. And he told the priest, look, Father, these really bad things happened to me as a kid. And you're a good priest. And so I'm going to do bad things to you. I'm going to kill you to get even, with balance the scales, right? A priest did something to me. Now I'm going to do something to a priest. And so he says, I'm going to give you 7 days. And then on the seventh day, on Sunday, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to kill you, Father. And since it happened in this confessional that was closed off, the priest doesn't know who it was that said anything. And so the movie is about his 7 days, his week, before presumably this guy in the village is going to kill him. And so the question is, does he leave the village, right? Does he just flee and hopefully things work out? Does he stay and try to figure out who it is and turn them into police? Does he accept dying for the sake of this, for the sins of this other priest? So what happens, right? That's the movie, and it's really, really good. But what I think it shows more than anything is to be a priest in the modern world takes a lot of courage, and it takes the exact courage that Christ had on the cross, the willingness to lay down your life for the good of others, and that's really what a priest does. There's no real reason why the priest wears black, but the common answer is that it shows that you have died to the riches and the glories of the world. That you have died to the self and the world, and therefore say, I'm no longer living for my own sake. I'm living for everyone else's sake, and in the representation of, in the person of Christ. That I have abandoned my entire will to God's plan, and there's really nothing more true than that, than to lay down your life again, whether it's very much physically in this case, or in that spiritual sense as well, that I no longer care about my desires, but I'm willing to give my life to God. So I think, it just takes great courage to be a priest in the modern world. So this is one of those movies that we would have watched. We don't have time to watch it, but I encourage you, if it would have been a great Lenten movie to watch, because it's definitely not a happy movie, but it really is well made. At least watch the trailer. I'll put the trailer in the lecture notes for today. And that last point too is that the priest is meant to be this go-between between God and his people. And that one is again pretty obvious, but you hear it in Mass all the time. When the priest raises up his hands and says, "Pray, brethren, that your prayers and mine, your sacrifice and mine may be acceptable to God, Almighty Father." He's asking you to pray for him so that when he brings all of our collective prayers up to the altar, that God might accept them. And so that's another major role of the priest, is being this go-between. All right, what about a real-life example? I said we'd always do some real-life examples. We talked a little bit about Father Dyer. Some of you guys know already about Father Shaughnessy. but he spent a lot of his life as a military chaplain, specifically with the Navy. And I want to say he obtained the rank of major. But he was a military chaplain. I want to say he also did 4 tours in Iraq, and also I think he may have even done something in Desert Storm. This is a picture of him as a chaplain, and the bottom picture here. And one of the things that I guess I want to emphasize about Father Shaughnessy as an example of this is that all the guys and the men and women in the armed forces, they have that sacrificial mindset, right? They want to lay down their life for some greater cause. And with Father Shaughnessy, you almost see this in a double sense, right? That you've got like this willingness to go into battle, but not to carry a gun, although I'm sure he knows his way around some weapons, but to then carry this idea of I'm going to minister to these soldiers in any way I can. I'll also post a link to a short video of some of his time in Iraq where he's being interviewed. But if you talk to Father Shaughnessy too, he's also like one of the most down to earth, normal guys you'll ever meet, right? He loves sports, maybe too much with the Patriots. It'll be very interesting to see this year with Tom Brady on the Bucks what his mood is. I mean, if we have football, and I hope we do. But Father Shaughnessy, really, the thing that I want to emphasize with him is this courage. And if you've heard any of the stories, right, like there was this time, you guys are probably, I guess, freshmen maybe, when Bishop Barber came in, so you might not remember this. But Bishop Barber was telling a story about how they were studying in Rome, and it was Father Shaughnessy who, when Bishop Barber was being mugged on a train in Rome, Father Shaughnessy just grabs the thief by the collar, says, "Is this guy bothering you?" and then throws the thief off the train. Right? This is a strong, kind of, we say manly man, but the real manliness, the real character there is this courage to lay down his life for the good of everybody else. There's a story again, Father Shaughnessy. I think this is on a documentary somewhere where there are bullets. There's soldiers talking about. There's this guy with bullets whizzing by him left and right. He's just going from soldier to soldier to soldier to anoint them, to bless them, and it's Father Shaughnessy. That's what that courage and willingness to give even to the point of death is exactly what we mean by a priest represents Christ. That's what Christ did for us. He died for us, for our sins, right? Suffered to the point of death. And that's really what a priest is called to do. So I think sometimes we have this sense of that priests are boring, they don't do anything. Like we said yesterday, they wait around for the next mass. But in reality, what a priest really does is he does that, right? He's training his whole life to give everything that he has over to God in the same way that Christ did. And when we witness that, it's an inspiring thing, but it's a transformative thing as well. So that's it for today. We're going to continue with the previous theme of just a journal reflection, and make sure that you complete that journal. Any of the journals you haven't completed, I'm not so much worried about how late they are. You only lose a few points. Test on Thursday, and I will see you guys in the next one.